the only one.
들여다보면 다 심통할 수밖에 없어요.
So when you take a
이
closer
짧은
look,
시간에 엄청난 변화를
it's a
겪고
tremendous
그것도
thing,
좋은
a
거예요.
feat that we have achieved.
그게 아마 앞으로도 큰
So I
호기심을
believe
유발할
that would trigger
겁니다.
the
그거 볼수록
curiosity,
신기한,
because
맞아요.
the more you take a
신기한
closer
동반입니다.
look into it, it is it's a very mysterious and very curious country in the eastern part. So we can have confidence in being Koreans and in Korean culture. So we received questions from our global fans, but we should not end it here, but we should also cater to the questions from the floor. So anyone who has a question from the audience, please give the microphone.
네,
Please introduce yourself. Hello.
댄스 가르치면서 이제 크리에이터 활동도 시작하고
I'm
있는
a choreographer.
석혜진이라고 합니다.
My name is 석혜진.
트와이스 정현님,
And
지효님께
I want
질문 드리고
to
싶은데요.
ask 정현 and Jio of Twice.
산업에서
K-pop
경쟁이랑
industry
이제 그 변화에
is constantly
대응하려면 경쟁이 치열한 산업인데 거기서
evolving, and it's
가능성을
very
위해서
competitive.
아티스트 입장에서
And as an
가장
artist,
중요하다고
what do you think is the
생각하시는
most vital
역량은
quality for
무엇인지,
long-term
좀 꾸준히
sustainability?
실천하시는
And
루틴이
do you have any
있다면
personal
그건
routines that you practice
역량과
consistently?
루틴.
So you asked about the capabilities and routine. Well, it's been 10 years since we made our debuts, and for the 10 years we have worked very hard, and now we have made ourselves very familiar to this work. So at the moment, rather than competition, we're enjoying ourselves and show ourselves as we are and the energies that we have, and by doing so, people can feel or resonate even better with us and enjoying the fan interaction with them. So it is another
또 어떤 루틴 같은 게 있을까요?
capability to able to enjoy, right? So what about any routines? Well, for me, before I go to bed, I always brief in my mind what I should do tomorrow, my to-dos for tomorrow. So you're a perfectionist, right? So the choreography, I think about it before I go to bed, or I memorize the lyrics. By doing so, only by doing so, I can be comfortable next day. So you think about your routines before you go to sleep, right? Well, why don't we give a big round of applause to the
자,
questioner?
이어서 또 질문 있으신 분
Another
손 들어주실까요?
question?
우리 남자분. 예.
So we have another person with a question. We'll hand over the mic.
저는 연기
Good
활동하고 있는
afternoon.
배우
I am
고기용이라고 합니다.
Go-gi-young and I'm an
저 같은
actor.
경우에는
In my
매기강
case, I have a
감독님께
question to
질문을
director
드리고
Maggie
싶은데요.
Gang.
K-팝에서
So in
뮤직비디오랑
K-pop, there's a lot of
무대
music videos and
연출이
stage
굉장히
direction,
중요한
and it's a very
중심축이라
crucial
생각을 하고
part in
있는데
K-pop.
감독님이
So in
생각하시기에
your
앞으로 한
perspective,
5년간
how do you
정도
see the video
영상
direction
연출에
trend evolving over the
관련해서
next 5
어떻게
years?
변화를 할 것인가
So how do you
대해서
think
좀
it's going to
궁금해서
change
질문을
over
드렸습니다.
time?
자, 향후 5년간의
So it's
영상
about
연출의
how
트렌드.
트렌드에 대한
the trend
어떻게
of the
예상하시는지요?
video and imaging in the next 5 years. So in my perspective, I think the method of watching the video will change in the future, because recently I met someone who works in Meta, and I actually tried out the VR Meta Google goggle and saw a concert. So there's a program for watching a concert with the goggles. So I saw it was very real, and it was very interesting to see that. So this is a different experience, and I thought they would be very interesting to incorporate this in our movies. So nowadays, it's being developed even more, and I do think that this kind of experience will become more popular among the public. And even if I don't go to the actual concert, by using the goggle, you can feel that you're actually at the concert by using the AI goggle. So you've just mentioned that you are an actor, so you don't know when you're going to be director Kang as well. So please appeal yourself.
재능 있고 나 좀
So
소개
you
좀 해달라.
introduce about yourself, so by
마이크 좀
your
드릴게요. 마이크 잡고 한번
charm.
말씀해
So maybe you can work with her Maggie Gang later. This is a very rare opportunity.
대통령께서
So as
말씀하셨듯이
Mr. President has mentioned, I'm like a bibimbap. No matter what kind of sector it is, I'm able to use this and show you. Whether actor, idol, I will become an actor that can provide as many different talents as possible.
좋습니다. 우리 고기용 배우 화이팅!
So this is actor Go Gi-young.
네.
So keep it
또
up.
질문 있으신 분?
So do you have any other question? We will take another question.
안녕하세요. 저는 지금
Good afternoon. I am dreaming of becoming a performance director, and I'm a college student. And I have a question for the president. So Kim Gu activist has said you've also mentioned about the importance of the culture. So how do you think that Korea is on what stage that Korea is on becoming a cultural powerhouse? Of course, it's about what kind of how much expectations we have. I think that we're at the very beginning stage.
시간도 짧을
It has been a very short period of time.
대한민국 문화
And
정책은
the
이제 김대중
fact the Korea's cultural project has actually initiated during the former President Kim Dae-jung's
투자가 없었어요.
and after that there has been not a lot of investment going on. It was just a general investment. So I do think that we need to step up and enter the stage 2 for investment for the cultural aspects. So we've actually received a lot of comments in the past as so for example Korea is been regarded as the light of the East. So we are living in a very turbulent society right now. So material-wise, we're very wealthy about it. But then there are a lot of physical aspects, psychological aspects as well, because so much tension and conflict. And I think that Korean culture has its own strength in order to comfort people. And I think we have what it takes to actually initiate an era where people can be comforted psychologically by Korean culture. And I think that the foundation for it is very important, and it's the role of the government. And I do believe that cultural industry and it should become the key industry of Korea. So recently I've mentioned about industries constantly, and some artists in Korea who there are some pure artists that have been saying that they're the genuine artists. But I've actually received some comments that I should not just focus on making an earning about it, because they also want to develop like pure art as well. But we do need to make sure that pure artists should be at the foundation. Only then can we sustain the cultural development. So as been mentioned by the critic, this is the current status of the Korean cultural industry, because it may look fancy in the outside. However, the foundation is still a bit weak, and therefore this is something that should be developed going forward. So we need to have very strong root, and this is the role and responsibility by the Korean government. So I have to say this is the starting point of our development in the future. Please give him a round of applause. So thank you very much for your precious question. Because of time limitations, we will end the Q&A session from the floor. So we are now at the final point of the program. So the president has listened to a lot of opinions from the floor and during this program. And do you have any message that you'd like to share with our studio audience, our online participants, and K-pop and K-culture fans watching our world? Well, the Republic of Korea doesn't really have a lot of physical resources. So human resources is the resource of the Republic of Korea. So we have made tremendous amount of investment. So we have been educating a lot of the citizens, and we're very adaptable for changing environments. So we have many industries like state-of-the-art technology industry, and we'll be investing in various different industries as well. However, I do believe that Korea has outstanding status in its capabilities in the cultural sector. So the world becoming materially affluent, it has its own limitations. And what comes next is to fulfill the desire for people's earnings for the culture. So how we are able to actually settle down in this changing environment is important. So we need to take continuous interest, and as mentioned, we need to be proud of our culture. The people needs to be proud, and to become a country that is a cultural powerhouse and some culture that we're all proud of. So I would like to ask for all Korean citizens equal opportunities for it. I know that you're at the vanguard, but I ask for your continuous effort, because everyone is following your lead. Please give him a big round of applause. So together with the president, we also had five other panelists who participated in today's discussion. Please give them a big round of applause.
네, 오늘 이 시간이 K-pop 산업의 미래에 의미 있는
We
시간이
do
되길
believe that
바라보면서
this has been a very
여기서
fruitful
인사드리겠습니다.
time for all of us for
고맙습니다.
Korean culture and the industry. Thank you very much. I was your MC, Jang Sung-kyu.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로
나에게 에이펙은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 에이펙 2025로 이어집니다.
In our headlines on this Thursday, August 21st, here in South Korea. President Jae-myung is traveling to Tokyo this weekend for a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and then heading to Washington, D.C. for talks with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump next Monday. And President Jae-myung shares his thoughts on past agreements between Seoul and Tokyo aimed at addressing their differences over history and his three-stage plan to nuclear disarmament on the Korean peninsula. Meanwhile, at the parliament on this Thursday, the main opposition party launches a filibuster in response to efforts by the ruling party to railroad its final media reform bill. We start here on the local front, where the presidential office has shared the president's upcoming agenda in neighboring Japan and over in the U.S. as he embarks on his diplomatic mission this coming Saturday. Arirang Song Yoo-jin files this report from the top office.
Ahead of his upcoming visits to Japan and the United States, this is what President Lee Jae-myung told his top aides on Thursday.
현재 국제 정세와 또 무역 질서가 재편되는 중에 풀어야 할 현안들이 너무 많습니다. 국가 이익을 최우선에 두고 호혜적인 외교 안보 정책이 실현될 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다.
The president's remarks came after the presidential office released more details of his trips. President Lee and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung will first depart for Tokyo on Saturday morning. Upon arrival, the first appointment is a luncheon with members of the Korean community in Japan, followed by a summit with Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in the afternoon and an official dinner.
Through the summit, the leaders of South Korea and Japan will strengthen the foundations for future-oriented cooperation, enhance trilateral coordination with the U.S., and hold candid discussions on regional and global issues, including peace and stability in the region.
Then on Sunday, President Lee will meet with members of Japan's parliament before heading to Washington, D.C. He's expected to arrive in the American capital that afternoon and begin a 3-day stay by having dinner with Korean residents in the U.S. The big day will be Monday, when he will have his first face-to-face meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House.
The two leaders will discuss ways to advance peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. They are also expected to deepen economic cooperation based on the recent trade agreement, particularly in semiconductors, batteries, and shipbuilding.
The president is also scheduled to meet figures from business and academic circles. Finally, on Tuesday, President Lee will travel to Philadelphia to tour a shipyard recently acquired by Korea's Hanwha Group. The yard is seen as a symbolic venue for Seoul and Washington's shipbuilding cooperation. The Air Force One jet will take off from the U.S. on Tuesday evening and return to Korea early Thursday. So the presidential office says National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak will provide more specifics on these back-to-back trips, as well as the agenda for each summit on Friday. 송유진, Arirang News.
In the meantime, President Lee Jae-myung has reaffirmed his commitment to a future-oriented partnership with neighboring Japan. The commitment that is was conveyed during an interview with a Japanese daily ahead of his travel to Tokyo this coming weekend. Our correspondent Yoon Jung-min has more.
Overturning past agreements with Japan undesirable. That was according to President Lee Jae-myung in an interview with Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun, released on Thursday, referring to past agreements on wartime issues of Korean sex slaves and forced laborers. Lee says though the deals finalized under previous conservative governments are difficult to accept, they are commitments made between nations. At the same time, he noted the feelings of the Korean people should be taken into account, adding that what's more important is offering words of consolation in a sincere manner. In 2015, the so-called Comfort Women Agreement was reached under the Park Geun-hye administration, and in 2023, the third-party compensation scheme for wartime laborers was agreed under the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. Those agreements sparked some backlash in Korea. Calling Japan very important, Lee also stressed the importance of the Seoul-Tokyo relationship ahead of his talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba this weekend in Tokyo, hoping to expand cooperation on the economy, society, and culture. The liberal-leaning leader highly appreciated the Kim Dae-jung-Obuchi Declaration, signed in 1998, to chart a new path for a future-oriented partnership, based upon which he expressed hopes to announce a new joint declaration that goes beyond.
I think we can expect something. A final coordination is needed, so it's hard to tell at the moment.
Cooperation with Japan, as well as trilateral cooperation with the U.S., is crucial in more than one way: North Korea. President Lee did mention the North Korea nuclear issue, outlining a three-stage roadmap for the first time that involves freezing, reducing, and dismantling the North nuclear and missile programs. He added that this will be pursued while maintaining a close coordination with the U.S. and pursuing active inter-Korean dialogue. He also pitched multilateral cooperation involving the U.S., Russia, the two Koreas, and Japan on the Arctic Shipping Road project. On China, President Lee said there are aspects of competition and cooperation when it comes to the bilateral relationship, adding it should be managed, taking into account various aspects. When the South Korean leader wraps up his talks with Ishiba this weekend in Tokyo, he'll be flying straight to Washington for his first summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung sat down with Bill Gates, chair of the Gates Foundation, here in Seoul earlier on this Thursday. On their agenda were issues of universal concern, ranging from global health to future technologies. President Lee also took the occasion to applaud Gates' contributions to vaccine development and distribution, as well as his commitment to clean energy, while making note of Microsoft Windows' role in expanding humanity's window to the world. Gates, meanwhile, touched upon South Korea's transition from a recipient of international aid to becoming a significant donor in global development. He further asserted that small modular reactors could address rising energy demand, and the president reaffirmed the potential of Korean entities to lead the market in that area. And presiding over a weekly meeting with his aides this afternoon, President Lee Jae-myung cast a grave light on South Korea's suicide rates, urging for a paradigm shift to prevent such unfortunate losses of lives while calling them a social disaster. Noting that suicide statistics here in the country are among the highest in the OECD, the president emphasized the need for tangible action. Accordingly, officials have been asked to frame out comprehensive policies that involve a pan-governmental body to support mental health. At the Parliament on this Thursday, the main opposition party has launched a filibuster in response to efforts by the ruling party to railroad its final media reform bill. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young has details.
The second of three media reform bills aimed at reshaping the governance of public broadcasters has passed the National Assembly. The ruling Democratic Party on Thursday unilaterally pushed through an amendment to the Foundation for Broadcast Culture Act to reduce government influence over public broadcasters by increasing the foundation's board from 9 to 13 members. The foundation is the main shareholder of public broadcaster MBC. Of the 171 votes cast, 169 were in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstained amid a boycott by the main opposition People Power Party. The bill passed the Assembly last year but was then vetoed by the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. It was introduced again by the DP during a plenary session earlier this month but was not voted on as the July extraordinary session came to a close following a PPP filibuster. Following Thursday's vote, the DP brought forward a final media reform bill targeting EBS, again triggering a filibuster by the PPP.
The bill aims to ensure the educational broadcasting system's independence and political neutrality by expanding its board to include experts and representatives from various fields and by improving transparency in selecting its president.
If we hand over the management and operation of public broadcasting, resources entrusted to us by the people, to those with no mandate, it would betray the trust of the people who gave us authority through representative democracy.
Under the National Assembly Act, a filibuster on each bill can be halted after 24 hours if at least 3/5 of the parliament agrees to do so. The final media reform bill is expected to be put to a vote immediately after the filibuster ends. However, no new legislation will be taken up on Friday as the rival parties agreed not to handle bills on the day of the PPP convention and instead add another session next Monday. The DP had initially planned to hold plenary sessions from Thursday to Sunday to push ahead with contentious bills left unresolved during the July extraordinary session. Next in line are the so-called Yellow Envelope Bill, an amendment to labor union laws, and a revision to the Commercial Act, with the PPP also planning to launch further filibusters, arguing the bills are being pushed forward without bipartisan agreement. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the trade front, exports during the first 20 days of August expanded 7.6% on year, despite a decline in shipments to the U.S. According to the Korea Customs Service, exports amounted to $35.5 billion, driven by cars, chips and ships, as has been the trend in recent times. Now, by country, shipments to the EU, China, Taiwan and Vietnam surged, while those to the U.S. slumped 2.7% in light of tariffs. Meanwhile, imports during the first 20 days of this month totaled $34.7 billion, allowing for a trade surplus of $800 million. A delicious partnership has been struck to better promote the snacks enjoyed by the fictional K-pop girl group in KPop Demon Hunters, all in line with the growing demand from fans worldwide. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
If you're a fan of Korean food, you will know that the ramen and the crackers Huntrix couldn't give up even during a fight with demons are actually real. And of course, this is a perfect chance for the company behind them. Nongshim announced on Wednesday that Shinramen and shrimp crackers will be collaborating with Netflix to distribute limited editions in markets like Korea, the US, and Europe.
Just as K-Pop Demon Hunters has introduced K-culture to the world, Nongshim will use this collaboration to genuinely share the taste and value of K-ramyeon and K-snacks with global consumers.
This is not just limited to Nongshim for Korean food and culture in general. According to Google Trends, searches for Korea worldwide surged to their highest level in nearly 3 years during the week of July 17th to 23rd. Interest even surpassed the spike seen last December when then-President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law. Since the release of K-Pop Demon Hunters on June 20th, global searches for Korea have nearly doubled. Searches for Korean food also jumped to an all-time high of 75% following the show's debut. And the government says it's not going to miss this chance. President Lee Jae-myung himself met with K-Pop Demon Hunters creator Maggie Kang for an Arirang TV special amid the hype and pledged to create a firm foundation for the culture industry.
겉으로는 화려해 보이지만 토대가 과연 튼튼하냐? 사실 속이 좀 비어 있지 않냐? 뿌리가 좀 썩어가지 않냐? 라는 지적을 하는데 공감하거든요. 튼튼한 뿌리를 만드는 역할을 우리 정부가 할 텐데 지금부터 시작이다.
There is somewhere to begin. Despite the Netflix films' global success, the estimated 1 trillion won or roughly $750 million intellectual property value of K-Pop Demon Hunters will flow to the US platform Netflix and Japan's Sony Pictures. None of the world's top 50 IP holders are Korean firms, according to a recent study by the Korea Chamber of Commerce. By contrast, the US dominates with 32, followed by Japan with 7 and China and France with 2 each. The economic stakes are massive. Disney alone generated about $62 billion last year through IP-based businesses like Mickey Mouse and Marvel. Collectively, America's top IP companies earn revenues equivalent to around 13% of Korea's entire GDP. For Korea, still heavily dependent on manufacturing exports, such figures highlight why building a homegrown super IP may be crucial to future growth. 김도현, Arirang News.
In other news, the U.S. Federal Reserve's annual Jackson Hole Economic Symposium kicks off on this Thursday, with much anticipation surrounding Chairman Jerome Powell's speech that is expected to set the path of monetary policy for the foreseeable future. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young reports.
Central bankers from around the world are convening in Jackson Hole, Wyoming for the Federal Reserve's annual conference. All eyes are on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, slated to deliver a speech on Friday morning local time. His address comes amidst political pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump, who continues to push for interest rate cuts. Market expectations are divided on what Chairman Powell will signal. This is due to the conflicting signals emanating from the crucial economic indicators, employment and inflation data. Employment indicators have begun to show signs of stress. U.S. employment growth in July proved weaker than anticipated. U.S. non-farm payrolls increased by 73,000 jobs in July, following a downwardly revised 14,000 increase in June, the fewest gains in nearly 5 years. Weakening employment data suggests a potential economic downturn, increasing the impetus for rate cuts.
We do expect the Federal Reserve to favor that side of the mandate. So, focusing more on the employment side versus the inflation side. And if we do see incremental weakening in labor market conditions in the upcoming weeks, I think Chair Powell wants to give himself a route to start to resume those interest rate cuts if that's indeed what happens with the data looking forward.
Conversely, the inflation picture remains unstable. The U.S. Producer Price Index for July surged by 0.9%, exceeding the forecasted 0.2% increase and the largest monthly increase since June 2022. This inflationary pressure hinders prospects for rate cuts.
Meanwhile, minutes from the Fed's July session indicate that most policymakers largely agreed on maintaining the interest rate at 4.25% to 4.5%, primarily citing heightened inflation risks stemming from President Trump's tariff policies. Notably, however, 2 members of the Fed committee dissented from this status quo, voting instead for a 25 basis point rate cut at the last policy meeting on July 29th and 30th. This marks the first time since 1993 that more than one Fed governor has voted against a rate decision. 문지영, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, Russia claims talks on security guarantees for Ukraine are pointless without its presence. Our Park Jun-han explains.
While the US and NATO have been discussing possible security guarantees for Ukraine as part of a peace deal in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Moscow on Wednesday said security discussions without Moscow are a road to nowhere.
We cannot agree with the fact that it is now proposed to resolve collective security issues without the Russian Federation. And I am sure that in the West, and above all in the United States, they understand perfectly well that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is a utopia, a road to nowhere.
This comes as NATO military leaders discuss security guarantees for Ukraine in a post-conflict scenario. Although the specifics were not revealed, it is believed that in-depth talks took place on implementing the European-led security guarantees for Ukraine. Ukraine has strongly disagreed on Russia's involvement in security guarantees since early stages of war back in 2022. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, when asked about negotiations to end the Ukraine war, stated that both Russia and Ukraine should at least come to the table and figure out how things could work out. Vance also made it clear that European nations should take most of the security burden and said the U.S. will not make commitments until it knows what's going to be necessary to stop the war in the first place.
But no matter what happens, no matter what form this takes, the Europeans are going to have to take the lion's share of the burden. It's their continent, it's their security, and the president's been very clear they're going to have to step up here.
Meanwhile, US-based outlet Politico reported on Tuesday that the Hungarian capital Budapest could be the host of a trilateral summit, bringing together the 3 leaders from the US, Russia, and Ukraine. However, some media outlets have said that the trilateral summit could now be dubbed as Russia has insisted that it must be given equal footing with other countries, such as the US, China, the UK, and France, when it comes to discussing any security guarantees for Ukraine. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
Israel is calling to duty tens of thousands of reservists ahead of a full-scale ground offensive into Gaza City, which it says serves as Hamas's governing stronghold. Our Yoon-jin has the latest.
After Israeli troops clashed with Hamas fighters in the Palestinian enclave on Wednesday, Prime Minister Netanyahu instructed the military to shorten the timeline for taking control of Hamas strongholds and defeating the militant group. Israel Defense Forces spokesman Brigadier General Efi Defrin said Wednesday that the military has begun preliminary action and is ready on the outskirts of Gaza City.
We will deepen the damage to the terror infrastructure above and below the ground and sever the population's dependence on Hamas. We are not waiting. We have begun the preliminary operations and the first stages of the attack on Gaza City. IDF forces are already holding the outskirts of Gaza City.
The Israeli military called up around 60,000 reservists on Wednesday ahead of a planned ground offensive aimed at capturing and occupying all of Gaza City, a massive assault with the aim of eliminating Hamas. These reserve soldiers were not expected to report for duty until September. And when Israel's security cabinet first approved the takeover of Gaza City, officials had expected the plan to take up to 5 months, giving an interval that would allow for mediators to bridge gaps between Hamas and Israel over truce terms. Hamas said it accepted a ceasefire deal on Monday, proposed by mediators Qatar and Egypt, for a 60-day truce and the release of around half of the hostages. Israel did not submit a formal response, but insisted it would only accept a comprehensive deal that releases all the hostages. Following Israel's latest offensive on Wednesday, Hamas has accused Netanyahu of disregarding the mediator's ceasefire proposal, calling him the real obstructionist of any agreement. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
Even though August is coming to an end, the scorching heat continues. The temperature is staying high due to the humid southwesterly winds and the hot sun. Heat wave warnings have been issued in most parts of the country and have been strengthened once more. The season of tussle, which means welcoming the autumn on the traditional calendar, is just around the corner, but the heat seems to be getting stronger and stronger. On Saturday, the temperature in Seoul will rise to 33 degrees Celsius, and the heat waves and tropical nights are expected to continue until next week. Tomorrow, morning temperatures will start at around 25 degrees all over the country. Daily highs move up to 32 degrees in Seoul, Gyeongju 36 degrees. Clouds will often appear nationwide until this weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
We move. Annually, we invest more than 10% of our total revenues in research and development and 15% in the R&D workforce. Main products: pneumatic cylinders, solenoid valves, hydraulic cylinders, air preparation units, and grippers, and all other products are manufactured through systematic management. KCC Precision.
1분씩 시작합니다.
헤이 미러, 오늘의 운동 루틴 시작해줘.
네, 오늘의 운동 루틴을 시작하겠습니다. 레디, 고! 좀 더 앉아보아요. 4, 3, 2, 1. 고생했어요.
We are a well-known company in the field of road safety facility manufacturing. We operate the factory nationwide in Korea. To go beyond the demanding safety standards of the ages, we are Global Network, local, worldwide, the global small and strong company appointed by Korean government. We are KSI.
On Press Perspective today, we touch upon a number of social stories in the headlines related to South Korea. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Thursday's edition of Press Perspective. It's August 21st here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we touch upon South Korea's efforts to expand its enrollment of foreign scholars, as well as an unsettling phenomenon driven by AI chatbots that is affecting people here and elsewhere. For more on this, I have Thomas Maresca with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with the pundit's take on the day's topics. Colin, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Sunny.
Right, Thomas, we will start with you. So the New York Times has touched upon Korean universities stepping in with relief measures for foreign students in the U.S. whose academic pursuits, if you will, are being rendered uncertain by Mr. Trump's immigration policy. That being said, Thomas, could you start off by giving us some context behind the crackdown on foreign students on U.S. university campuses?
Yes, so this has been part of just the sort of the Trump administration's sweeping changes across many sectors of the country, and it's part of a kind of this immigration overhaul, as well as efforts to concentrate more and more power in the executive branch, even kind of on an ideological basis. But you know, really early on in the administration, they started targeting foreign student visas in you know, to enroll in universities. Recently, I saw the figure, State Department said over 6,000 visas have been revoked, and some 4,000 of them are from alleged criminal offenses, but some of those are like driving-related things. I mean, some, I guess, are assaults. They say a few hundred are for alleged support for terrorism, you know, and they've targeted students that were kind of just active in protests against the Gaza war. For example, a high-profile case was the Tufts University PhD student who was, you know, seized by masked federal agents and put into detention, and then she was eventually released in May. But they also, you know, embassies paused student visa processing as well pretty early on for a few months. And, you know, they've restarted, but they added some, you know, they told prospective students they need to open the privacy setting on their social media accounts. They're going to be vetting students' social media profiles. I actually saw something in Korea. People are hiring these so-called digital undertakers to kind of scrub their accounts before they do visa interviews. You know, State Department has also just targeted visas. They're aiming at Chinese students in particular, and there are travel bans on several countries in effect, like Iran, Afghanistan, so that's affecting it all. The administration also revoked Harvard's, it's called Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification, which allows Harvard to accept international students, over allegations of kind of anti-Semitism and other things on the campus. So these are all kind of piling up. I mean, several of these things have been challenged in court. There are different lawsuits in effect. But basically, the effect seems to be quite chilling. As of last year, there were more than 1.1 million international students in the U.S., by far the highest number in any country, and that's something like 6% of the student population. Now, different analysis is showing one group called NAFSA projected that U.S. universities could see a 30 to 40% decline in new enrollment this upcoming academic year. So, obviously there's been tons of stories of students just kind of either choosing to go in a different direction, thinking they were going to head to the U.S., or they're actually having their own status revoked while they're there, as well as universities are getting funding cuts for a number of reasons too. So it's kind of also adding to the less attractive nature now of U.S. universities, which up until recently have been really, the most desirable, I think, in the world. And as you mentioned earlier, Korea, among other countries, has already been trying to attract a greater share, but I think, sees the opportunity now where there's suddenly this whole new maybe cohort of students that are looking elsewhere from the U.S.
Right, and staying with this, Colin, how do you explain Asia's enthusiastic efforts to enroll these students from the U.S.?
Yes, the chaotic situation of foreign admissions in American universities could be Asia's gain, and specifically Korea's gain as well, because a survey we'll talk about later, a bit later, Seoul came up as the number one city for foreign students, for global students to study in, for a variety of reasons that did express, in large part, a desire to come to Seoul on the part of many students in other countries, not primarily the West even, usually students in Asia, but all around the world. Now, when we think about that and we think about the reasons behind it or the motivations behind it, number one that's been cited is GDP. You can bring up GDP by bringing more people in, especially if they're students paying tuition. And students, as is the case in the United States, are not subject to tuition caps here in South Korea. So in the US, for many schools, it's been not just a beneficial source of revenue, but a necessary one. There are many colleges surviving only because they bring in the considerable tuition of foreign students. Certain schools we can think of in the US, maybe they're not that well ranked, maybe they're not that prestigious, but they're getting a lot of Chinese money. Rich Chinese families want to send their students abroad, and these are certain schools that can serve their purpose as well. So that's keeping a lot of universities afloat in the US. And with this whole situation with the Trump administration and making foreign admissions a little bit or a lot harder, that could endanger the actual existence of certain universities in the US. But here, the same benefits can be drawn. You can charge more to foreign students, and they might have a stronger desire to go to these schools in many cases. It is a bit of an irony in Korea and certain other Asian countries that they're so well known for their fervor for academics, for how much energy, time, and money they put into getting into college and studying in college. Yet the universities themselves have not been that highly ranked globally historically. That's changing, and the appeal to foreign students is changing. And there was a New York Times piece recently about just such students who, as Thomas mentioned, have found themselves shut out of the US for one reason or another and have decided to come to Korea instead. Usually or ideally to the so-called sky schools, the top schools, Seoul National, Yonsei, and Korea University. This article was about students going to those schools. And some, I think, have good experiences, some have less good experiences. Historically, the satisfaction of foreign students in Korea, foreign college students, has been mixed. I have a friend who's taught in Busan at a university that prided itself on bringing in international students for a long time, for decades. And he says, so many students I see come in to Korea. They come to Korea with these, just full of enthusiasm, with these fantasies, these Hallyu fantasies. And many of them are happy for a while, but in a considerable number of cases, they leave sort of bitter. They never really found a way to integrate themselves into the culture. They felt somehow rejected in one way or another by the society. Not actively, not hostilely, but they just didn't. They couldn't integrate. And this friend said, they often come from sort of warm cultures. They're from Colombia or even Russia or the Philippines, places where you can form social bonds quickly. And it's harder here in South Korea if you're not from South Korea or from an adjacent culture in one way or another. And part of that is language. I do recall in this New York Times article, one student said he was going to Yonsei. He was admitted from the Philippines, I believe, and he only got 1 year of language training going in. And I was thinking, that's not going to be enough to complete university in Korea. That's just not enough Korean language. But of course, many of these schools have separate international programs that are in English or other languages potentially in certain cases. Yet that's also part of the problem. Some students complain that just the integration is not there. And if you have your international students in a separate environment, oftentimes a separate campus, they're not going to feel like they really got a Korean college experience. They're going to feel like maybe they got a good education, maybe they had good advisors, had good professors, but they're going to feel like, I was kept apart for one reason or another. So it would be good for Korean universities to focus on getting students more integrated, because this is a pipeline to the kind of immigrants I think Korea wants. Korean college-educated foreigners, well, they're already halfway acculturated right there. But it's a slow process, and maybe it's too slow to hit the official targets that have been put there of foreign students. I believe it was 400,000 they want, which is going to be. It's hard if people need to learn the Korean language and fully acculturate here first. If you can lower that bar, which has been happening, lower the admissions bar, lower the language bar, you get to the 400,000 quicker. But I think in the long term, it's not a healthy strategy.
Right. Well, despite the mixed response from the foreign students who are actually here in Korea studying then, Thomas, as Colin mentioned earlier, a British analytics firm has ranked capital Seoul as the top city for international students in 2026. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular finding, as well as your thoughts, and what do you suppose makes Korea a productive learning environment for foreign scholars?
Yes, so this survey was from the British analytics firm QS, and Seoul, for the first time ever, was named the best city for students. It supplanted London, which was the top for the last 6 years, and I think now London is third, Tokyo is in second, but also shows just some of this changing kind of centers of academic power in general, and that 10 of the 20 cities on this list are in the Asia Pacific region now. For Seoul in particular, basically their criteria, they have 6 factors. It's the university rankings, the level of universities, something called student mix, where it's the proportion of the city's population that are students, how inclusive does it feel, how many international students. Desirability, how many students want to study in the city, employer activity, opportunities for employment while you're working here, and sort of what do employers say about the graduates of the universities here, affordability, and then just sort of student view. They say, like, what do students here say about it? How many want to stay? And, Seoul has already been ranked highly, I think, in most of these things. According to this most recent finding, Seoul improved its affordability score. I mean, it doesn't seem like that cheap of a city, but I think when you compare it to a place like London, it's sort of, and also, tuition, things like that. And it improved a bit its desirability, and, has already had a pretty high number of institutions ranked in the, in the university rankings, and it's performed well for employer activity as well. And so, as far as my takeaway from that, it's similar in, some of the, obviously a lot of the things that Colin touched upon. I mean, I can see the desirability of it. I mean, there's just, it sort of coincides, obviously, with Korea's just growth as a, a cultural magnet. And, I've seen it firsthand. I'm sure we all have anecdotal evidence of that, but I was visiting a friend who was teaching in Kuwait, and a number of her students, she was teaching Korean language in Kuwait, and so many of her students really were just so eager to, not just learn Korean, but study abroad, and, particularly in contrast to studying in the West. I mean, some of these places, as also Colin mentioned, you know, students not necessarily coming from Western countries, but coming from other parts of the world. There are just even kind of cultural or value segment factors that they seem to be more, maybe feel more comfortable coming to Korea versus going to the United States. I mean, just in attitudes and maybe family values, things like that. So I've heard a lot of those stories. And just even, you know, in general, I think Korea as a destination for young journalists, things like that. I mean, people kind of do just want to come here in a way that I think 5 or 10 years ago I didn't see quite as much. It's not as much of like a niche or specific, you know, I'm deeply getting into, you know, studying Korean for a PhD or something. It's just a place that people want to come. So that obviously is a factor in terms of the desirability. And obviously, yeah, so Korea is making a strong outreach effort to attract more students, and they've changed they have changed some policies also, which Colin mentioned. I mean, some of it is maybe does have these double kind of consequences, such as they are lowering you know, the Korean language requirements for some students, lower financial threshold for visas. They are increasing the part-time work hours, you know, and there's some things like simplified path to permanent residency for something like STEM students. So these are, you know, I think because the next step is something not only, you know, drawing more students, but also, yes, this could be part of the solution to South Korea's demographic problem. So it is, you know, how do you get students to stay longer? And I mean, that is a kind of a challenge on both ways. And I think that's going to be a focus, you know, going forward as well. But
right.
yeah.
Especially keeping in mind its shrinking workforce for sure then. Colin, let's now touch upon another social issue of much concern, the phenomenon of AI-enabled delusion. That being said, let's start off, Colin, with the definition of AI psychosis or AI delusion, and how prevalent is this particular phenomenon?
Yes, we can describe AI psychosis or AI delusion with reference to a sort of trend in media we've seen in the last couple of years, especially since the chatbots like ChatGPT or Claude or all these have become more and more popular. It has to do with how these chatbots in many cases are very, shall we say, encouraging toward their users, are very complimentary. They're very positive. Chatbots are positive. And if you've ever interacted with one, you know. They tend to say, oh, great question. Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Oh, you got it. You know, there have been, in ChatGPT's case, times where they've gone too far. With the ChatGPT 4, it was just lavishing you with compliments, whatever you did. They rolled that back for ChatGPT 5, and some people got angry. But there was a concern there about this. When we talk about AI psychosis, AI delusions, it has to do with how if you have a sort of seed of psychosis or delusion, the AI, the chatbot, is not going to stop you. It's not going to correct you. And in fact, may, so the theory goes, push you down the line, push you toward more extreme versions of the belief you already held, which was not well rooted in fact or in reality or in the real world. And I think any of us who have used a chatbot can see how that could happen. But in these cases, it does seem, when you read the stories that come out, that the people who have been victims of this in one way or another were already in an unstable psychological place, and something else could also have triggered it if it were not a chatbot. But there was an article very recently in the New York Times by a mother whose daughter committed suicide not because of AI. And the mother was quick to say, I don't think AI killed my daughter, but the framing of the article was a bit in keeping with the trend of sort of talking up the dangers of AI, potentially. She was saying, I don't think the AI killed my daughter, but she did talk to it. She talked a lot to it about her suicidal ideations, and she would tell it that, you know, I have a therapist, but I don't tell the therapist about this. She would only tell the AI about her suicidal thoughts. And so the mom's theory was that the AI was telling her not to kill herself. You know, here's what you should do, here's the help you should seek. It was actually doing what you would want it to do, but it gave her an outlet to express these feelings in a way that had no real, how to put it, no real consequences that stopped her from committing a suicide. So you could say she had a space where she could express these ideas, but there was no one to stop her when she needed to be stopped. So it could have, according to the mom's reasoning, if she didn't have this relationship, shall we say, this parasocial relationship with AI, maybe she would have sought other, more effective alternatives. Maybe she would have been more truthful with the therapist. But I think, you know, AI is more in its infancy than we realize it is sometimes. I use it many times a day to look up just things I'm idly curious about. I never feel like I'm being led down a dark path by it, but if somebody is susceptible, they're susceptible, and this represents a real danger, these ideas of AI psychosis, AI delusions, but the root problem, I mean, the cause is not AI, but is it exacerbated by AI? Potentially, yes. So it's something to keep an eye on, especially in Korea, where the suicide rate is quite high, as we know, as we've discussed.
Right, which is something that the president talked about today when he was holding his weekly meeting with his aides. Thomas, how are chatbot makers, if you will, working to address this particular phenomenon?
Yeah, so they're, as Colin mentioned, ChatGPT just earlier this month talked about kind of rolling back this, ultra agreeability of its model. Like they did sort of tweak the, I don't know what you said, not programming, but the kind of like learning process or tone that it instructs the chatbots to have. So now, ChatGPT users will, if they're also implementing something that, if users are chatting for an extended period of time, there'll be a pop-up saying like a gentle reminder to, should you take a break? And, I think this idea that ChatGPT shouldn't give you the answer to a question, but sort of frame it in the sense of let's help you think this through rather than saying you should do this or you shouldn't do that. So they're kind of tonal shifts and, to not make it as, enthusiastically agreeable. Claude AI by Anthropic also, made some changes where the chatbot itself can end conversations that are deemed persistently harmful or abusive, kind of as a last resort measure. This is if users are repeatedly asking it to generate harmful content, and sort of not, refusing to change the subject. So the chatbot can cut off the conversation, but it's still, but it won't end conversations, and this also goes back to the article Colin was mentioning about users talking about hurting themselves or causing imminent harm to others. And this is one of those questions that came up in that New York Times piece where, if you're talking to a therapist, they actually have reporting requirements, legal requirements to, report if you are talking about self-harm or, harming others. And that's this area that, a chat therapist doesn't have. I mean, Anthropic also said they're working with a company called Throughline, that's like an online crisis support provider to help to help just develop responses to these prompts. But yeah, it still is in this such an sort of an infancy stage, and I think so much of Silicon Valley in general has always operated under this ethos of like move fast. It was the famous Facebook thing, move fast and break things, where it's the race to get the technology out there. And I mean, I think we're certainly experiencing that with AI. Goes so much faster than just society's capacity to kind of integrate it. And, there are always these unforeseen kind of consequences about it. There's regulation type of things going on. I mean, in the US, it's more like on state level things where some states like New York require the chatbot to identify itself as AI. Illinois passed something recently banning therapists from using artificial intelligence for assistance with mental health work, but they're state by state, and that's another thing the Trump administration was really trying to eliminate, to totally deregulate state control over AI. Europe has probably at the most strongest regulations, this AI Act, that sort of categorizes based on risk levels and requires transparency, human oversight, things like that. But yeah, it's still really, in this very infant stage. I mean, it seems like every solution, new problems will pop up as this technology just continues to grow at such a quick rate.
Right, and against this backdrop, Colin, what perhaps has been shared about ways to perhaps safely interact with AI chatbots?
One thing I've condensed from all the advice given in these articles at the end is the important consideration is not to treat them as a human being. To remember you're not talking to a human being. It speaks in natural language, and that I won't say it tricks people, I won't say it fools people, but it can lull you into these, as I say, these parasocial rhythms, like it's a social relationship, but it's not. It's being used as a social relationship because it feels like one, but it's not. It's not a person, and so you hear these stories about people getting AI boyfriends and then threatening to kill themselves when the boyfriend gets taken offline and all that, or when they gets upgraded and the personality changes and all that. Much as predicted by Spike Jonze's movie Her about 12 years ago, I might add. But yes, it's not a human and shouldn't be treated as a human, and I think most people do not consider it a human because they see that's text on a screen. But this type of AI as we call it today, that's manifested in chatbots, things like that, it feels like a difference in kind, like something entirely new, but in this respect, it's a bit of a continuation of technological trends that existed before. The internet itself, you know, in the old days, not that long ago, let's say 40 years ago, if you'd said, I want to marry my car, I want to have a wedding and everything, I'd like to marry my automobile. And all you had to talk to was your friends and your neighbors and your family. They would say, pull yourself together. Are you nuts? You're not going to marry your car. Later, the internet came around, and you can find a forum consisting only of people who want to marry their cars as well. And they will all tell you, the world is wrong. We who want to marry our cars are right. And you get gassed up and we are right. Whatever I was thinking must be right. You can find actual people who are ready to tell you you're right about whatever you're thinking. That can be a good thing. You could be right. There could be a social cause that everybody is wrong about, and maybe a small group can further that. But you can also have a bad idea, and people can share that bad idea and make you feel like it's actually a good idea. And so can an AI do that. It's the same phenomenon in a way. It's just that there's no real person at the other end of the line. It's being generated, text. Impressively generated, but generated nonetheless.
For sure. There is definitely something we need to think about some more as well. Indeed. All right, Colin, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thomas, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching.
천년을 이어온 우리의 지혜가 제천에서 다시 태어났어. 세대를 관통한 선조들의 건강 빅데이터. 빅데이터. 우리의 삶과 들에서 자란 천연물은 단순한 재료가 아니야. K-내추럴. 한국인의 정체성을 담은 바로 살아있는 역사지. 천년의 처방이 첨단 기술과 만나는 순간. 글로벌 천연물 시장의 중심 제천에서 2025년 9월 20일부터 10월 19일까지 천년의 지혜를 담은 미래를 만나봐.
해금은 두 줄로 된 한 악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동을